Hi, writer friends. Welcome to Creative Momentum's interview series, where writers and healers offer perspective on the creative process. I'm your host, Meg Heyerts. I'm the founder of Creative Momentum, where we help writers free their voice, nourish their practice, and finish their project. I am so delighted to be joined today by my mentor and friend, Cindy Shearer, professor and program chair for the MFA in Interdisciplinary Arts and Writing at California Institute of Integral Studies. Cindy is the author of Stay with Writing: Practices for Sustaining the Writer's Work and Life. She also designed and co-leads the creative dissertation pathway, focusing on art practice as research for the PhD in East-West Psychology at CIIS. Her essay, 13 Acts of Seeing Further: Creative Writing as Text Image Art and a Quest for Care, appears in Empathy and Creative Writing: Ethics, Diversity, and Communication, edited by Graham Harper, out from Palgrave. She is a writer, text image artist, and writing coach. Cindy, you are one of the most generous, nurturing people I know. You're always uplifting other writers and artists in very informed and skillful ways. So I am overjoyed that we get to celebrate you and your book,
Mm.
Stay with Writing. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I love seeing all those little tags in the book. It's really exciting. And if you don't mind me saying before we start, I was just thinking when you were talking, I've now known you more than 10 years, probably more like 11 years or so. So it's fantastic that we're still finding these ways to connect. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for that.
Thank you. So, this book is so grounding and inspiring. Would you please read us the section Writing is Being at Home?
Yes, I'd be very glad to. Um, Writing is being at home. Be at home in your writing. Feel at home. Be in your home. Being at home is being comfortable when you write. It allows you to relax into, walk with, own what you have to say. Feeling at home allows you to feel right with, secure in, a belonging to what you have to say. Being in your home means you have a place to go to write. It may be the place where you work or live, or a place that you travel to in your mind, but you can step into that place. You can return to it again and again. A room of one's own is important, but really to write, we need to be at home. Writing arises from solid earth. Home is feeling grounded, connected, and calm. Home is really a place, a secure place, a place to take risks, a place to rest or let down. Home base, touchstone, secure attachment are all aspects of home. Home is the place, psychological or physical, where our writing can begin, develop, and end. Home provides foundation. Home provides structure. When we are not at home, we wander with our feet and in our hearts and minds. At home, we don't roam. We sit attentively in our chairs and write. That comes from 10 Not So Tangible Tools for Writing, a piece of mixed media that I made in the early 2000s.
Beautiful. So that's kind of where the book ends up a little bit. The book starts with your broken shoulder, and with impermanence and illness and loss as part of the origin story of your relationship with writing and of the amazing set of precepts that you've developed to guide writers, and to guide yourself and others through the creative process. There's a refrain in this book: loss is not failure, it is loss. And in the introduction, you write, my experience is failure and loss permeate the making of creative work. Failure is everywhere in the process and always within what's produced. And then you go on to say, quote, In Stay With Writing, I focus more on loss and what can be found than failure. I've learned from loss, and what I've found in others and with others helps me sustain how I navigate failure. End quote.
Mm.
And then the book offers these incredibly satisfying tools and perspectives for putting one foot in front of the other and creating our way through the unknown. Um, and, collectively, we're feeling a lot right now. We're going through a lot of loss. And so I find this book to be just such a beautiful offering to writers who are facing our current moment, as well as writers just facing the daily realities of the creative process. We won't have time to go discuss all the principles you get into in the book, so everyone, please go read the book. Um, but there are through lines of writing as mending, writing as relationship, writing as trust, and the idea that where there is loss, there is also found. But before we get into these practices for sustaining the writer's life and work, I wonder if you could speak to that conflation of loss and failure, how that conflation can happen, how it affects a creative process, and why it's meaningful to discern the difference.
For sure. I think for me, one of the things that comes up briefly is the reason, in a sense, I was asked to write this book, which is I gave a workshop at an organization called National Association of Writers in Education, and it was kind of on this idea of sustaining the writer's life. And I did the workshop around quitting writing, like why you quit, why you stop doing it, and um, in that probing of that, I really began to think about, when we quit, why would we restart? And then I sort of, obviously follow the trajectory of that in the second part of the book. But it really came up for me these two ideas of the ways in which we fail as writers and the things that, have an impact on us in our artistic lives, the kind of losses we experience, but also our personal, our live lives, and how they affect us as writers. And so when I started to tell those stories, I realized how deeply and how much I just wanted to be honest about all the ways that I had failed. And I was even thinking about this morning about how in the artistic life failure is always there. Every day you sit down to write, for example, say I have a 2 hour block for writing. But at the end of an hour and a half, you're like, yeah, I'm distracted. I'm done. I'm moving on. Or maybe there's 10 real minutes where you feel like you actually get something done. But then, you don't really failure, right? The brain goes, failure. You didn't do the 2 hours. You didn't, instead of embracing the 10 minutes when you really worked or that kind of thing. And then there's just all the actual failures of you try to publish your novel and 30 people reject it. Agents, publishers, everybody. You give it to people read and they tell you, yeah, that part's not good. All of that stuff is there. And so you're like, yeah, okay, why am I staying with this? I'm failing. I try and I fail. So it's an environment in which not succeeding is happening way more than succeeding in certain kinds of ways. And so for me, it comes down to this idea of clarity about why you do it, why you do it. Like the desire is one thing, but the actual understanding why it's important to you and being willing to commit to that is really the other thing. You add into that the mix of loss. And as you know from reading the book, the first part of this book is about significant loss that I had from someone who was an early mentor to me. Elliot Coleman was going to be my entree into the world of art making, and then he died, in a very short time after I knew him. And so, contextualizing that loss is a lot of, helped me to see also in other ways in which loss had influenced my career as an artist and my relationship to failure. In other words, what I'm trying to say is the loss is real, so is the failure. They're not, they're actually two separate things. One is very tied to the work and to your experience of being in the process. The other often is very tied to your real life. And I think what happens is, like for me, a lot of the process was, oh, yeah, I don't have that anymore because Elliot died. Therefore, I'm a failure at what I do. And that really deep understanding of that, no, that was just a huge loss in my life. It didn't change anything about who I am, what my capacities are, what my ability to learn is, what my talent might be. None of that changed because of a loss I experienced in losing a job, losing a parent, losing a mentor, getting a divorce, whatever it might be. But those things are always there as an influence, and I never want to discount them. So to me, experiencing the loss, allowing ourselves to be with and care about the loss, while also understanding that, we have our reasons for doing our work is super important to not let those things, create a connection that's not real. In other words, I think a lot about this book is saying, be with what your experience is, but don't give it more weight than it deserves. Stay with those things that really matter to you as an artist. Let them keep moving you forward. So that's why such an important part of my work is helping writers to understand the why of it. What is being an artist for you? Understanding that then allows you to understand the work you want to make. And if you understand the work you want to make, then you can make it. And so, yes, those things conflate, but they're also separate and separating them out. The wonderful thing is that I think if you dive into either, the experience of failure or the experience of loss, there is this possibility for what is found. And a great beauty for me in writing this book is to articulate all the found things, because all the found things connect to who I am and what I can take forward for my work. So partly I'm also trying to say, don't be afraid to engage the loss. Don't be afraid to engage the failure, because there are things there for you to find.
That's beautiful. That's so important just to kind of remember the feelings and the emotion and the desire and the loss are like one part, and the understanding is the other part. And if one of them falters, the other is still is still there. Um,
Also, I think important to say it's real. Like if you're experiencing genuine loss, there are things you may not be able to do
mhm,
creatively. That
mhm,
doesn't mean you can't do them or you won't do them. It may mean that right now they are not yours to do. And I think sometimes like we live in a world that's about powering through or it's about, meeting our commitments or whatever those things are. Sometimes other things take precedence. Doesn't mean you're not an artist, doesn't mean you
mhm.
can't be a writer. Mhm.
Yes. So, in my own writing practice, you've told me just to get words onto the page, watch the movie of the scene play out in your mind, and then write down what you saw. And I've passed that advice on to many of the writers I work with, folks who are watching this interview. And just that one sentence of advice has been so key for me. And so it was really cool and edifying to read an entire book about your philosophy behind that recommendation to observe first and make meaning second. Um, which incidentally is also how tarot cards are often read.
Okay.
Start with what you get from the image rather than starting with the abstract meaning. And a lot of folks in our community read tarot as part of their writing practice. So I think that's a cool overlap in terms of creative process with this book. Um, Reflecting on your mentor, Elliot Coleman's process, you write, really seeing his experience through the images became, I believe, a way for him to glimpse the meaning of it. Seeing and meaning became linked together. End quote. And you ultimately developed pedagogy out of that connection between image and meaning that you observed in his practice. Um, you've encouraged writers, and I quote, to draw as well as write their images. I wanted them to sketch with pencils and words. And I hoped that when drawing and writing were used to focus their attention, they could slide into a more generative or contextualized seeing. And then there's this beautiful line you write, gesturing to William Carlos Williams, so much depends on my willingness to see. And and just kind of a side note about the other senses, you also talk about Alonzo King's Lines Ballet and beginning with gesture and movement. You mention that you might next explore sound as a starting place, but it's always about starting with the senses. Could you tell us more about why image is your way in to meaning?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about a good way to get into that. I think one thing I'll start with by saying is I've been thinking recently about the idea of detail and how detail leads us, like the idea that that which is the most personal is the most universal. Um, I think the idea that that which is most detailed leads to the most meaningful is kind of part of where I'm headed with it. I mean, what I learned from Eliot, from observing him, because as you know in the book, he recited what he wrote because he had had a stroke and couldn't really write anymore. So I watched his revision process. I watched how he moved through detail. He went from specifics to more specific to less number of specifics. And you could see how in that process he would move towards meaning. I call it seeing and then seeing into. And I think I'm drawn to the seeing aspect because I think seeing focuses us to actually look at the detail. Also, we're a wildly visual culture these days. So much of the information we get is the graphic novel, television, film, those kinds of things. So I think we're more attuned to it. But for me, it's an entree into what is there. And you asked me for an exercise to offer later. I'm gonna do one that's focused on image. But what I've discovered over the course of my time of working in this ways is that image contains story or it contains content. And so I'd like to invite people into seeing the image because it's basically, if you open it up, if you unwrap it, you may find all kinds of stories that you can't see if you don't investigate it, if you don't play with it, if you don't inquire into it. Um, more and more I've just become, as I connect to other arts and artists, I just become more aware of other senses. You could do the same with taste. You could do the same with touch. I was talking with a woman who's a dancer the other day about how kinesthetic she is in her process. Seeing, I think, is an entree for a lot of the culture. It's what I do, and so it's how I navigate it. But I think about any of the things that I say, I would say, see it for what it is and then apply it in the way that it's meaningful for you, particularly if you're, as a writer, drawn to other senses. But the important piece for me is the way that seeing forces you into the specific. And in general, specific image. And if you open up that image, there's often lots of possibility. I'm not sure.
Mm.
Did I answer what you were asking?
Yes, that's great. And then I have a related question too. Um, so through making text and image art and practicing writing as art, you mended your estranged relationship with writing. Um, as with image being your way into meaning, these physical acts of repair and bridging within art making were your way into healing inner rupture, which makes me think about the body keeps the score and what we know about emotions being stored in the body. Um, why is it important that we find ways to make writing tactile?
I think for me, because it was the way to connect in to meaning. I mean, the kind of the joke for me, like the untold joke in the book is that I quit writing, but I kept writing the whole time. Like I wrote a book about writing, which was a work of text and image while I was quitting writing. So obviously it was still very alive for me in a way. But it's like, in a sense, I had become so disconnected from how I understood myself as writer, artist, that my solution was to create a whole new art form, which allowed me to come back to the things that were actually meaningful for me. And so my way of doing it was, and as I did it, I got super excited about the kinds of forms and the ways that I could play with things, the ways that stories could be created on boards and boxes, all kinds of things like that. I think, for me, the piece that I want to offer to other writers is around that. Yes, that tactile experience could be really important, but it's really more about, what connects you to the processes that are meaningful for you. Is it a walk? Is it a meditation? Is it sewing? Is it doing dance as you write? Is it any of those kinds of things that help? Like the thing is your work is connected to what you care about, to and what you know about what you care about and how you want to convey that to others. And that can be work that like through your experience, but it can also be things that you know through your imagination. And so, what are those things? What are those experiences that you could try that will help lead you to that? I think there's a lot of value for everyone in drawing because drawing slows the process down to try to see, even if you're a terrible drawer, which like I am, or even if you draw fairly abstractly, it slows the process down. It's like to draw something, you have to really see it. And then if you can see it, you can be in dialogue with it. Seeing for me is a process of engage. It's not just looking, it's engaging the thing that's there. And when you're in a conversation with it, it can lead you to things that you want to do, want to make as an artist.
Hmm. You write that curiosity is part of every aspect of your work. I especially noticed the word curiosity in the section on play and in the section on possibility. And one way you help writers cultivate a spirit of curiosity is through developing awareness of the choices we're making and the choices that are available to us. You frame choice as an act of agency that contrasts the ways loss limits. And you point out that we get to choose how we pay attention to our work, and from there, these arrays of choices unfold, choosing what to reveal and what to leave out, for example, or even choosing to trust our art or choosing to make art as a gift or offering. What is one of your favorite questions to ask yourself or your students during the creative process?
Well, one question you already know is what is the movie in your mind? What do you see when you're writing? But I think one of the other questions that I like to ask a lot is what does that mean to you? For example, my original training is as a poet, and that was actually something I was going to say in the other answer too. So I begin the writing process always with a very deep respect for all words. Like words are like containers for me. They have a whole lot inside them. And so it's like you see into the word as well as you see into the thing that you are trying to write about. And it's in that combination of things where, for me, the work can emerge. And so a lot of what I ask is, what are you saying when you say that? What are you saying? What are you seeing? I think is a really important piece. The other is, I think, to say, Like, did you notice this? Did you notice that image? Or did you notice that this X, Y, or Z comes up 3 or 4 times in what you're writing? What if you were to look into that? Or when you step away from this, what are you curious about? What do you want to know more about is also something. Or a lot of times I'll do it as a statement. I would like to know more about, X or Y. Are you interested in knowing more?
And there's all of these layers of understanding that you get into in the book. Um, there's a line in Writing is Relationship section that reads, "What I missed in the first version of myself as a writer was not asking what happened when I compromised my vision." And it goes on to ask these important questions that we need to ask of our work. But what struck me most was just that phrase, the first version of myself as writer. And I just find this idea so fascinating and freeing that we're always drafting ourselves. Um, you talk about articulating as a component of the creative process that's different from being immersed in it. That it's important to step back sometimes and notice what's happening in the work, as you just mentioned. Notice what we're reaching for, how we're going about it, what the repetitions and intuitive choices are telling us about the meaning. So, all these questions about the work. And then this one line, the first version of myself as writer, steps back even further, not just to how you're conceptualizing your art, but how you're conceptualizing yourself as a maker of art. And you offer exercises throughout the book for us to do this for ourselves as well. Um, could you speak to that distinction between stepping back to look at how the piece is functioning versus stepping back to understand who you are as a writer? Um, and if you feel like sharing, what is something you've noticed about the current version of yourself as a writer that's most alive for you right now?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think it's a nice invite. The thing that comes to mind, right off the top of my head when you ask that is, um, in around 2011, 2012, in many ways, I quit doing what I call writing as art, which is the work of text and image. Not because I didn't care about it anymore. I just felt like I really wanted to get back to focusing on being a writer, and just focusing on using language in my work. And then when I started working on this book, I kept coming up, as I tell a lot of people, I wanted to tell this fuller story about Elliot Coleman. I kept getting stuck about certain aspects of it. And so at one point I got stuck, and you'll see in the book, I make this postcard, and which was a form that I used very early on in my text image work. And I thought, um, why am I doing this? But I really wanted to. And so one, I think that that version of me now is that, oh, you can revisit these things that you think you're done with or that you've moved on. So there's this idea of an ongoing evolution, but there's also this ability to go back, to restart. Like there are these things that I've carried all my life and tried to do in certain ways, some of them quite as failures. They didn't work, or I couldn't finish them, or something happened and they didn't work out. And yet they're still there. And so I find two things. One, in this version, I can go back and do them again in a new way if I want to. And I can also move them. I can be like, oh, that's what postcard making used to be for me, or that was the purpose it served. But now I can see it as this. It's its own thing. It's a new thing and an old thing at the same time. And so I kind of love that thing about it. It's not like, oh, I used to be this and now I'm this, but I'm kind of this mix. I'm this blend of a lot of things. Whether I even do them or not, I'm still a blend of them. I carry forward a lot of the learnings from them. I think the larger piece about for me, it was really important to understand where a lot of the failures came from. And I think two things really emerged for me. One was getting too far away from the meaning of the work and wanting to really stay connected to that. In other words, making work to make work, to experiment with ideas or those kinds of things rather than why do I care about this? And so that's a value that I realized in whatever version of myself I am, I want to keep coming back to. The other is that, how do I want to say this? That uh, yeah, the failure was true, but not defining. That these things that really matter, I kind of just reference this, that really matter, they're there. And maybe it's not the time to work with them. It's the time to let them continue to grow and develop. One of the things that I like to say to writers that I work with a lot is sometimes work just fails because you try to bring it forward in a way that it's not ready to. So it's learning to look inside yourself to know this work is actually ready for the kinds of things that I want to do with it. This work is still in development. I talk in one part of the book about learning to be both writer and reader of your work. And I think that's really like, yeah, on a lot of levels, the kind of thing that we're talking about. In other words, you're a maker and an observer at the same time, and willing to kind of cultivate both of those relationships with your work is super important.
Can I pull a tarot card for you?
Please.
What have you been thinking about in your creative life? This can be about kind of a specific maneuver from one paragraph to the next, or as large as like what we were just talking about. What are my values as a writer?
Yeah, actually, I've actually put in a proposal for a new book, and it's kind of in review right now. And one of the things that I'm gonna do, if that is part of that project, is rewriting something that I wrote before in a new way. So I'm
Mm.
really thinking a lot about that, like all of the, "Ooh, can I do it? Do I have the capacity to do it? Will I enjoy it? Will it actually be the thing that I envision it being able to, to be? So yeah, I'm really interested in that. Like I feel really drawn to build this book around this idea of remaking something that didn't work before because I have a new vision for it. So I think that's a lot of where my attention is at the moment.
Mm. Okay, I pulled the reversed hanged man,
Ooh,
um, which has a great perspective for looking at things, new perspective, upside down. Um, this is kind of the reversed hanged man is like an inversion of an inversion, which makes me think of just kind of like spinning a cocoon or doing that like aerial yoga or something where like go upside down and then go upside down again and just kind of see how much you can disorient yourself
mm,
in order to see it fresh.
hmm,
Um, because this card emphasizes just the unconventional perspective we can get when we are um, willing to hang by trust
right.
and not by external signifiers of whether we're safe, whether other people are getting it. Um, yeah, I think this is really giving you permission just to kind of like spin around um, and have fun with it.
Yeah, that's really nice. Really interesting because I had this instinct. I started doing all of this reading about there's an era in which this project is set. And my instinct was I needed to find a way to connect to this era differently. And so
Mm.
I'm reading these things that I never read, like because I'm trying to gain this knowledge, not that I'm going to use it directly, but I want to enter the world through this, this other way of thinking about this time. So yeah, thank you. That's actually making me feel like, yeah, follow that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this kind of makes me think like learn a few dance steps from that
Yeah.
era or
Yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah, exactly.
non-mental ways of doing it.
Yeah, it's so fun because I kept going too. Like, what were the famous films? What were the famous commercials? Like, I just kept
Mm,
going to like, what are all the things? Because
mm.
I didn't know what to draw from. So it's like, just keep pinging.
Yeah. That's really interesting because the Hanged Man is kind of an iconoclast and
Mhm.
like is not can see beyond conventions.
Ah,
So it makes sense that in research you would be like, well, what were the conventions of the time? And that's an important piece, but that might not be the way in.
right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. Yeah, yeah, because that's the instinct, not to use them directly, but to see what they tell me so that
Mm,
I can
sure.
play with something. Yeah,
Yeah.
very interesting. We'll see.
Yeah, let me know how it
I
goes.
will.
Um, and would you offer us a writing prompt,
I
please?
will. I
Thank
was
you.
telling you before we came on, this exercise that it involves two things, image, looking at image, and also a concept that I talk about in the book called Art as Offering.
Mm.
And if you don't mind, I'm just going to read a couple sentences to set the stage for that for people who haven't read yet. Um, I say, um, I start to think about writing as an act of offering. And I say, I think of offering as what we have to give. We offer ourselves for our own reasons and to something beyond us, other people, causes, organization, groups. I see offering as an act, how we offer, and an offering, the thing we offer. Um, and so, using that idea of offering as two things, as an act of what we make and offer to other, and then the thing that we actually offer to others. So, in this exercise, I want to invite everyone to play with two things. One, how an image can lead you to what you have to offer, and two, how it can help you explore what you need to see, do, or learn to help the work become something you can offer to others. Um, Take about the way I've chunked it up about 35, 40 minutes to do the exercise. You could take longer, but sometimes I think there's a value in doing it rapidly. Make a list, a short list of stories you feel willing to tell and explore, and then focus on one and write that story. And on this first part, focus on writing. Bring in as much detail as you can. Then read the story, circle any images that stand out for you. Note them as you do, circle them, mark them in red. Then looking back at those images, focus on one and write or draw that image. By write the image, I mean focus on what you see. As you do, reflect on why it is important to you, what the seeing offers you, what it invites you to see. If you draw the same as you're drawing, focus on creating what you see, but as you do, reflect on why it is important to you, what the seeing offers, what it invites you to see. Now, using that process and the image as a starting point or a focal point, write the story again. Then read over what you've created and ask yourself, what does this story, the image within this story, offer me? And what does that suggest to you that you want to offer? Or what does it inspire you to offer? That part of the process is about you and what's happening inside you. Then, what might you explore next to help the image-led story become something you can offer to others? So, in the exercise, focus on what the image says to you, what it suggests you care about and might want to offer. But then just at the end, play with, okay, if I was going to make this into something, what might I do with it? A fun way of approaching it, if you want to play with it a little bit, is when you do that first reading, if you circle 3 or 4 images, use all of them. Let each one convey a part of the story or be a lead into the story, and then see what the accumulative effect of those images leads you to that you might want to offer.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Cindy. Everyone, I really recommend getting a copy of Stay With Writing because there are so many more exercises like that one that will just make writing irresistible. Um, and um, yeah, just the exercises in the book are will just help writers strengthen your confidence in your craft. It really demystifies how we go about making our art. So thank you so much, Cindy.
So it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Happy creating, everyone.